once knocked over a lamp and learned that lesson the hard way. No dramatic retelling tonight, just the quiet evidence of cautious placement. Another miner shields his lamp as he carries it toward a storage area, checking on sacks of crushed ore. Even at night, responsibility lingers. Gold dust left unattended might tempt both human and animal curiosity. Joke number 2 arrives when someone remarks that the lamps are the hardest workers in camp, since they never complain and never ask for extra rations. A sleepy voice replies that if lamps start demanding beer, everyone is in trouble. Soft laughter follows, blending with the wind. You notice how your own breathing has slowed to match the gentle rhythm of flame movement. The lamp's glow feels hypnotic. Its light reaches only a few feet, but within that space, it creates a world. As more miners lie down, lamps are either extinguished with a careful pinch or left to burn low. A few remain outside, marking pathways between huts. The camp dims gradually, like embers settling deeper into ash. Joke number 3 drifts in quietly as a miner mutters that tomorrow he will ask the king for a larger lamp and a smaller mountain. No one responds immediately. Everyone is too tired, but a faint snort of amusement answers him from the darkness. You sit still, watching one particular flame sway gently. It feels fragile and resilient at once. Without it, the camp would vanish into shadow. With it, the night feels navigable. And as you rest there, warmed by that small circle of light, you realize that these humble oil lamps are more than tools. They are companions against vastness. Tiny suns holding their ground in the endless desert night. The camp has mostly quieted, but not entirely. A few lamps still burn, and where there is light, there are always stories. You shift closer to a small group gathered near the outer edge of the settlement, where the desert begins again in earnest, flat, pale, and endless under the stars. One of the miners, a broad-shouldered man with a voice like gravel softened by time, clears his throat. He isn't announcing a grand performance. He simply begins speaking, and the others lean in instinctively. Storytelling here isn't a scheduled event. It's an extension of breathing. He tells of a scarab beetle that once rolled a ball of gold instead of dung, pushing it across the desert as a gift to the sun god. The beetle struggled, of course. Gold is heavier than it looks, and in some versions of the tale it accidentally rolled the ball into a river and lost it forever. The moral seems flexible. Either don't try to outshine the gods, or even sacred insects have back problems. You smile in the lamplight. Scarabs were indeed powerful symbols in ancient Egyptian religion, associated with the sun god Khepri and the idea of rebirth. That's your mainstream historical fact woven gently into the night. Scarab imagery traveled widely through the Nile Valley and influenced neighboring cultures, including Nubia, especially during periods of close contact and shared religious symbolism. A younger miner produces a small amulet from around his neck, a simple carving, vaguely beetle-shaped. Whether it was crafted locally or traded from farther north is hard to say. Gold mining camps, despite their remoteness, were not isolated from cultural exchange. Amulets like these were believed to offer protection, particularly against unseen dangers. In a mine shaft, where rock shifts unpredictably and air grows thin, unseen dangers feel very real. The storyteller continues, shifting now to a tale about a river spirit who guards hidden gold veins beneath the hills. According to him, the spirit dislikes greedy men but favors those who sing while they work. You suspect this conveniently encourages musical labor, which is good for morale and possibly for productivity. Still, the story has a rhythm to it, and the listeners nod along. A quirky tidbit floats through the conversation. Someone claims that if you place a scarab amulet near crushed or overnight, the gold particles gather more obediently in the morning. There is absolutely no scientific basis for this, but it's charming. Ancient mining communities across different regions often blended practical labor with ritual gestures, small symbolic acts meant to invite good fortune. Whether this exact practice occurred regularly is uncertain, but the impulse to give chance a little nudge with superstition is timeless. You glance at the children curled near their parents. One child's hand grips a small carved figurine shaped like a bird. Perhaps it represents a local deity, perhaps simply a toy. In Nubia, Religious practices often intertwined indigenous beliefs with influences from Egypt, especially during the Kushite period. Temples dedicated to Ammonius existed in Nubian centers like Napata, and religious iconography traveled along with trade and political power. Historians still argue how deeply Egyptian religious systems penetrated everyday Nubian life versus remaining primarily elite practices. In this lamplit circle, you sense a blend, formal gods in temples far away, and intimate spirits in stories told at night. The gravel-voiced storyteller pauses to sip beer, then resumes with exaggerated solemnity. He describes a miner long ago who ignored the warnings of the hills and struck his hammer too loudly at dusk. The mountain, offended, swallowed his voice so that he could only whisper for the rest of his days. You instinctively lower your own voice in response, as if the hills might be listening even now. Someone mutters that if the mountain swallowed his complaints, perhaps that was a blessing. That's joke number 1 for this section, light and affectionate. A breeze moves through, stirring sand along the camp's edge. The lamps flicker but hold. You notice how storytelling seems to expand the circle of light, even though the flames remain the same size. Words create space. Another miner joins in, offering a shorter tale about a wandering trader who claimed to have seen cities beyond the Red Sea where buildings gleamed with metal roofs. The group reacts skeptically. Metal roofs sound suspiciously extravagant. You file this under possibly exaggerated travel gossip, which appears to be an ancient human specialty. Historians still argue about the full extent of Nubian trade connections during different eras. While it's clear that trade routes linked the Nile Valley to the Red Sea and beyond, the precise scale and frequency of certain exchanges remain debated. Archaeological evidence provides tantalizing hints, foreign pottery fragments, beads of unfamiliar materials, but complete records are elusive. A young woman begins humming softly, picking up the earlier melody from supper. This time, others join in, layering simple harmonies. The song is repetitive, easy to remember, likely passed down orally through generations. Work songs in many cultures help regulate rhythm and lighten labor. It wouldn't be surprising if similar songs echoed inside the mines during daylight hours. You find yourself swaying slightly, lulled by the rhythm. The lamplight paints everyone in warm gold tones. Fitting, you suppose, for a gold camp. Joke number 2 arrives when someone suggests that if the river spirit truly rewards singing miners, they should all become professional musicians and retire from mining immediately. A sleepy voice responds that the spirit would probably still demand they carry instruments uphill. Even in fantasy, there's no easy escape from gravity. The storyteller finishes with a quieter anecdote about his father, who once claimed to see a faint glow in the mine wall before striking gold. Was it reflection from a lamp, a trick of the eye, or something more mystical? Historians still argue whether ancient accounts of glowing veins were poetic metaphors or misunderstandings of mineral luminescence under certain lighting conditions. Some quartz can indeed reflect light in surprising ways. But in this camp, the explanation matters less than the hope it carries. You look around at the listeners, their expressions softened by fatigue and firelight. Stories here are not grand epics carved into stone. They are modest, portable things like the lamps themselves. Joke number 3 slips in gently when a miner concludes that if the scarab truly rolled gold instead of dung, it clearly had better career prospects than they do. Laughter, quiet but genuine, ripples through the circle. One by one, people begin to drift away, carrying their lamps back towards sleeping mats. The stories taper off, sentences unfinished as yawns take over. You remain seated for a moment longer, watching the storyteller's face in profile. The flame beside him wavers, casting shifting shadows that make him look both ancient and young at once. In the hush that follows, you understand something simple and enduring. Gold may be the reason this camp exists, but stories are what make it livable. The lamps burn on, and the desert listens without comment. The stories fade into the desert air, and the circle of listeners thins until only a few figures remain awake. You notice that even as conversation dwindles, a quiet undercurrent of activity continues. Gold never truly sleeps, not in a camp like this. Near the edge of the lamplight, 2 men crouch beside a low wooden tray, carefully pouring fine gold dust into a small leather pouch. They work with slow precision, movements deliberate and almost ceremonial. No sudden gestures. No wasted motion. You find yourself holding your breath slightly, as though a careless exhale might scatter the glittering grains into the sand. This dust, once sealed, will not remain here long. Here's your mainstream historical fact for this section. Nubian gold was a critical resource in regional trade networks, moving along the Nile and across desert routes to support not only Kushite rulers but also neighboring states, particularly Egypt. Gold functioned as currency, tribute, temple offering, and symbol of divine favor. It was both economic fuel and sacred substance. You imagine the journey ahead for this small pouch. First, it will travel by donkey caravan to a larger settlement, perhaps to a river port where boats wait. From there, it might float northward along the Nile's steady current, guarded by men who understand its value. Some gold will be melted and shaped locally. Some will be traded onward. Some might even cross eastward toward Red Sea ports, linking into wider trade networks that connect Africa to Arabia and beyond. Historians still argue about the precise scale and organization of Nubian gold exports at various points in history. Egyptian inscriptions boast of enormous quantities taken from the south, but such records often served royal propaganda. Archaeological evidence suggests significant production, but exact figures remain elusive. What you know for certain is this: the gold dust before you is part of a much larger web. A third miner joins the pair and checks the pouch's knot. He tugs it twice, then hands it to a young runner who will sleep with it tucked beneath his mat tonight. Trust here is practical but cautious. Gold invites temptation. A breeze brushes past, and you think about how this quiet camp is tethered to places the miners may never see. Cities with temple columns. Market squares buzzing with foreign languages. Royal courts where gold is weighed on delicate balances and shaped into ornaments for elites. One of the men glances toward the river and mentions traders from the north, Egyptians perhaps, who sometimes arrive with linen cloth, metal tools, and beads in exchange for raw gold. Trade along the Nile has been active for millennia, facilitated by predictable currents and seasonal winds. Boats traveling south against the current could rely on sails catching northerly winds, while northbound journeys drifted with the river's flow. It's a system so efficient it feels almost designed. A quirky tidbit emerges as one miner claims he once saw a bead made of blue glass so bright it looked like captured sky. Glass beads, indeed, were traded widely in antiquity, valued for their color and rarity. Whether the bead he describes came directly from Egypt or through multiple exchanges is unclear, but it hints at the reach of interconnected economies. You sit on a low stone and trace patterns in the sand as they speak. You imagine caravans stretching across desert routes, donkeys laden with sacks, drivers wrapped in linen, stopping at wells marked by stone cairns. Gold from this ridge may one day pay for incense from Arabia, ivory from deeper Africa, or fine pottery shaped along the Mediterranean coast. Historians still argue whether certain desert trade routes were seasonal or maintained year-round, especially in harsher stretches of terrain. Climate, political stability, and security all influenced how and when goods moved. A single skirmish or drought could redirect entire networks. A miner jokes softly that if gold could walk on its own, it would save them all a great deal of effort. Another replies that if gold could walk, it would probably run away from kings first. That's joke number one for this section, and it carries a mild edge of truth. You glance toward the hills again. In daylight, they look barren. At night, they seem almost secretive, as if aware of their role in these distant exchanges. It's strange to think that a grain of dust scooped from a quartz vein might eventually rest in a royal tomb or temple treasury. The young runner returns from tucking the pouch away and settles down near a lamp. He watches the flame as if it were a miniature sun. Perhaps he dreams of following the gold north one day, seeing the places it goes. Or perhaps he simply hopes tomorrow's work will be easier. Another miner recounts hearing about lands farther south where gold nuggets are found in riverbeds, needing no hammerstone at all, just patience and keen eyesight. Whether this story is accurate or romanticized is hard to say. Gold deposits do occur in river sediments, formed by erosion of upstream veins. But the idea of easy, surface-level treasure has a way of growing larger in imagination. Historians still argue how extensively ancient Nubian miners exploited placer deposits, gold found in river sediments versus hard rock mining in quartz veins. Evidence exists for both methods in different regions, but the balance likely shifted depending on geography and technology. You feel the interconnectedness of everything here: the Nile, the hills, the lamps, the hands, even the jokes, all part of a chain that stretches far beyond this quiet hour. Joke number 2 arrives when someone suggests that perhaps the gold prefers traveling more than they do. After all, it sees more of the world. A sleepy voice responds that if gold truly enjoyed travel, it would stop hiding in rocks. Soft laughter ripples. The lamps burn lower now. The pouch of gold dust rests hidden beneath woven matting, guarded not by soldiers but by trust and shared necessity. You realize that in this camp, gold is both intimate and distant. It sits in their palms, yet its destiny lies elsewhere. It connects this modest settlement to empires, temples, and traders who will never know the names of the miners who extracted it. Joke number 3 slips in quietly as one miner mutters that if he ever sees his own gold turned into a necklace, he hopes it at least chooses a comfortable neck. Even in exhaustion, imagination persists. The last of the trader's stories fade, replaced by the steady hiss of lamp wicks. Above, the stars trace silent routes across the sky, mirroring the unseen trade paths below. You sit in the cooling sand and feel the weight of invisible networks stretching outward from this small circle of light. Gold will move on at dawn, carried by river and caravan. But for now, it rests here, silent, heavy, patient, beneath the watch of oil lamps and the wide Nubian night. The camp settles deeper into night, but you begin to notice something you might have missed earlier. Who is still awake? Not the broad-shouldered storytellers. Not the men who checked the mine entrances. Instead, you see quieter figures working steadily at the edge of the lamplight. A woman kneels beside a low grinding stone, moving a rounded handstone back and forth over crushed quartz. The motion is rhythmic, patient, almost meditative. Beside her, a younger girl watches closely, mimicking the motion in the sand with her fingers. Gold mining, you realize, does not begin and end in the tunnel. It extends into the domestic sphere, into hands that rarely appear in official records. Here is your mainstream historical anchor for this section. Archaeological evidence from ancient mining settlements across Nubia and Egypt suggests that ore processing, crushing, grinding, washing, often involved women and children. While royal inscriptions emphasize kings and expeditions, daily labor within camps was likely shared among families. The grinding continues, a steady scrape under the soft hiss of lamps. You imagine the cumulative effect of these small motions repeated night after night. It is meticulous work. Crush the quartz fine enough, and gold particles can be separated more efficiently during washing. Nearby, 2 children crouch over a shallow basin of water. One carefully swirls sediment while the other peers in, searching for glints. Their brows furrow in concentration. It looks almost like a game, except the stakes are very real. A missed fleck of gold is not just a missed point, it's lost value. Historians still argue about the precise social structure of such mining camps. Were families living here permanently, forming stable communities? Or were some camps more transient, populated by rotating labor groups under royal oversight? The archaeological footprint, remains of huts, cooking areas, tools, offers clues, but the daily human dynamics are harder to reconstruct. You shift your attention to a woman repairing a woven basket. The reeds are frayed at the rim, likely worn from hauling crushed stone. She threads new fibers through with practiced ease, reinforcing the structure. Tools break. Containers wear out. Maintenance never ends. A quirky tidbit drifts from conversation nearby. One older miner claims that in his youth, a woman in the camp could spot gold flecks faster than any man, and that she insisted the trick was listening to the water as it washed over the sediment. Whether this was poetic exaggeration or genuine technique, you can't be sure. But it highlights something important. Expertise here is earned through repetition, not proclamation. The lamps cast gentle halos over these quiet tasks. You notice that the energy of the camp shifts subtly when the louder voices fade. There is no dramatic transition, just a soft emphasis on steadiness. A small child stifles a yawn and leans against his mother's side. She pauses her grinding long enough to smooth his hair, then resumes. The rhythm doesn't break for long. You think about gender roles in ancient Nubia. Artistic depictions and inscriptions show women participating in religious life, sometimes even holding positions of influence. The kingdom of Kush famously produced powerful queens known as Kandakes, some of whom ruled in their own right. That's a significant historical reality. Nubian society appears to have afforded elite women notable authority in certain periods. Yet, at the level of mining camps, daily survival likely dictated more practical divisions of labor. Historians still argue how much autonomy ordinary women in Kushite society exercised compared to their Egyptian counterparts. Legal documents are sparse, and interpretations vary. But here, under the lamp glow, autonomy looks like competence, knowing how to grind, sort, mend, and manage. Joke number 1 for this section slips in when a woman glances up at a man who has just boasted about his hammering strength and says dryly that if he hammered as efficiently as she grinds, they would already be finished for the year. The surrounding laughter is soft but satisfied. You watch the children again. One of them suddenly gasps and points at the basin. A tiny speck gleams at the bottom. The girl's eyes widen. It's barely visible, but it's there. The woman leans over, nods approvingly, and carefully lifts the particle with a damp fingertip. Success, measured in dust. You realize that these small moments, finding a fleck, repairing a basket, teaching a child, are as essential as swinging a hammer underground. Another miner's wife adjusts the wick of a